If you don't do 10 million in volume, your split's higher. If you don't use our ancillary services, your split's higher.
We don't actually need to monetize the agents and turn them into a product.
I was on a call with someone who was trying to present me with what he thought was a good opportunity. He's like, yeah, you'd have to sign this 10-year thing. I'm like, you realize I have the same opportunity. I have to sign anything. And I could do it anywhere, not just this little region in California. Cash is oxygen to a business. The company is really doing two things. One is that operational excellence for the agents, operational excellence with distributed leadership.
You can be a solo producer, you could be a small team, you could be a mega team.
This conversation is helpful because it's helping me to have some clarity.
The platform statement stands, right? Like you can be a solo producer, you could be a small team, you could be a mega team.
Yeah.
You could attract, I was on a call 2 days ago with an agent who's a solo producer, $45 million, solid producer, right? Yeah. He had me on an attraction call with a very big team. And I asked him, I said, what do you make a month? And he said, 10 grand, but I spend 5 hours a week on it, right? So it's not his focus. He considers production his focus.
Yeah.
And again, 5 hours may sound low, but that's still 1 hour a day, right? It's still a pillar. But when you think of that person's iconing, so they were at 100%,
yeah,
pretty much. And then they're pulling in an extra $120,000. That's a pretty cool opportunity.
Well, and what they're doing, so I've been saying this for 4 or 5 years, because if you look at the macro, I think the macro is an example of the micro. So the macro is brokerage. The problem that they're having is that they're having to deal with the following. The net company retained dollar to brokerages has gone down 50% over the last 50 years. So it used to be if a brokerage took in $1, they kept 50 cents. Now it's like 10 cents. That's a huge problem. They're also dealing with a massive decline in revenue when you go from 6 million to 4 million transactions. Plus with the NAR thing, I think with a high degree of probability that there may be some compression in terms of professional fees.
If I were betting, I bet it goes down, not up.
Right, me too, on the buy side. So all of that, what I share with people is, look, cash is oxygen to a business. After the rah-rah and the marketing, Warren Buffett says in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine. I think. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. Who's actually making money? So if I look at the macro, it's happening on the micro level too, right? It's the same issue. Now, the way that the macro dealt with it was to become vertically integrated on ancillary services, right? Well, what this platform does, and what I share with agents all the time, it allows me to be vertically integrated, where I get equity in the company that I'm helping to build, right? An S&P 600 company. I also get this other opportunity, which stands next to me, which makes up for any compression in commissions. And that's really what you're saying, right?
And also understanding that like our core business model is profitable and sustainable.
Yeah.
And so we don't actually need to monetize the agents and turn them into a product. Like I keep you on the partner side. And I actually said that to people, I'm like, listen, if an opportunity isn't profitable, meaning like at the unit economic standpoint, they lose money every time they close a transaction.
Yeah.
At some point, they will monetize you.
They have to.
Right? Whether it's their ancillary or the model shifts.
Which I'm already seeing, where I was on a call with a brokerage in Chicago, and here's what they said, Leo. If you don't do 10 million in volume, your split's higher. If you don't use our ancillary services, your split's higher. That's what you're talking about. Yeah.
Which, again, I'm in the business of partnering with the very biggest producers.
Yeah.
Again, like I know the avatars across our spectrum, but like I'm quite proud that our top 250 teams sold north of 69,000 homes. As a standalone independent company, those top 250 teams would have been the 6th largest independent by transaction count in the United States. Right? And the companies in that ranking are 18, 20,000.
Which I think is great, because one of the things I hear from people is like, oh, you guys just care about like attraction. It's like, nah, dude, we do the most units.
Period. And our per person productivity is on the high side compared to like other national companies. And so what I realized early on when I got here is I'm never going to disproportionately collect ancillary services, because when you're doing business with companies that have 10, 15, $16 million in gross commission income, those are fully integrated companies.
Yeah.
They own their ancillaries.
Yes.
And I need to make sure that my platform allows them to plug and play and support that, right?
Yes.
We want to be able to give you all the legal advice and make sure the ABAs are compliant and that you're staying on the right side of RESP and all the stuff. But like, if I had to figure out how to make us valuable by monetizing you, I would have a hard time attracting
Yes.
the most productive people.
Because it goes back to that principal and agent problem. It would create friction. And it would basically create the problem that the legacy kind of models have. And then as a result, because we wouldn't be able to attract the best talent, everything rises and falls on leadership. Without the leadership, like, it doesn't matter. And what I've realized, and I'm curious to see your perspective, because I know you've done lots of things in all different areas, whether it be selling tons of units, be the number one real estate agent at KW, whether it be a lending business or software exits, and now the CEO of EXP. I think what protectionism leads to is mediocrity, because then people get lazy. And you no longer have to innovate, or you no longer have to continue to evolve, right? Because, like, I'm protected and I'm good.
Was that, to me, the best example I've
Would you agree
witnessed.
with that?
Perfectly, and I'll give you examples where I've seen it
Yeah.
done wrong and done right.
Okay.
So, famously, Kodak actually developed the digital photo process. And they didn't use it because it would cannibalize their business.
And they knew it. They did a study, right?
and they made the decision of, like, we're going to roll the dice.
We're going to let it die. Yeah.
And they were right. They were right about, and I talk about directional accuracy.
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you we will hit this number by this date, but I can, with a high degree of certainty, and this is what I've managed to do my whole career, is like, I see society, economics, future going in a certain direction. So at some point, that number will go higher.
Yeah.
So sometimes I just bet on directional accuracy.
Yes.
And so Kodak had the data that said that was the future, but it would cannibalize their core business. And so they said no. On the contrary, a really good example that is legendary is Apple.
Yeah.
Their iPod was their best-selling product of all time.
And they killed it.
And when they made the iPhone, people said, Steve, if you do this, you will kill our golden goose.
Yeah.
And he said, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I think innovation is being willing to blow up what works because of directional accuracy.
And I think that's hard because money has an addictive quality, and because of it, we get addicted to the way that we receive it. So people have a hard time being like, hey, I'm going to make this change. The other thing that it made me think about as you were speaking, well, Ray Dalio said it, you need an accurate assessment of reality in order to produce a good outcome. Not the way you, like, somebody tells you it is, but the way it actually is. Tony expounds on that by saying, you need to be able to notice patterns. Notice them. That requires I read, I pay attention, and that's what you're saying, like directional act, that's pattern recognition.
Exactly.
The second is when you notice them, to have the courage to use them. And that's where I feel like we are as an industry, because we were talking off camera before we got started. In game theory, there's this thing called a shilling point, which is if you give people, and it's a competitive situation, whether it's war or business, if you give them access to the same resources and you let them just kind of do their thing, if you check in 5 years later with a very high degree of probability, they're all going to come to the same conclusion without talking to one another. And that's what the pattern that I'm seeing in our industry is, that they're all coming to the same conclusion without speaking to one another. So me and you are saying, hey, directional. I'm noticing that pattern with a super high degree of probability, right? It's not perfect, but with a high degree of probability. When I hear Gene Frederick say that in 10 years, 50% of all agents will be with cloud-based brokerage, when I look at the pattern, I'm like, yes, 100%. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I mean, I've known Gene since I was 19, right? And
have you really?
Yeah, and I remember when he decided to go with EXP.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was early.
Early.
And he saw it and he went back to Northern California and sold all his franchises.
He had to do, in a way, what Steve Jobs did.
He said, I saw Netflix.
Yeah.
And I actually like the Netflix analogy, right? So disruption is interesting because, first of all, it's dramatic. Mm-hmm. And then once you create a new category, a new way of being, it becomes like the new way, right? So Netflix disrupted brick and mortar in a way that I feel we've disrupted.
I agree.
Brick and mortar real estate. And so what I said to a group of agents the other day, my guess is at a higher disproportionate rate, all new national companies will look a lot more like us than, legacy companies.
Which we're already seeing happening.
Which we're seeing happening. So it was more of a reminder, because people are like, did you hear about so-and-so? I was like, I'm assuming every new so-and-so is going to look like us.
Yeah, and here's what's really cool about that is I run this mastermind for agents. They have to do like $1 million a year or more in GCI. And we were having this conversation, and I was saying to them, like, hey, the real hard part is thinking.
Well, so let me finish my thought there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because as I look at the landscape, right? So every new streaming service is going to look more like Netflix than Comcast,
Which is already happening.
with this like huge studio production and selling boxes to people's houses.
Yeah.
Right. But what you see when that happens is the next ones can't ever get the same scale.
Now,
Right? So like Hulu and Peacock will never have the usage that Netflix has, or comparably, Amazon. Amazon has like 75% of all the market share of online traffic. And so I fully believe and understand that we are Uber. Somebody will get to be Lyft, and then in a very distant third and fourth, you have the regional players, which again, in Miami, there's a mobility app that's unique to Miami, and I've seen one in Austin and some parts of California, like Waymo's in San Francisco. But to get to the national, international scale, it's typically first mover advantage.
Yep.
Moved really quickly.
Yep.
Right. So in the analogy of pretty much the FANG is what we're describing, we sit in a really interesting spot now because we are fully scaled. We're well capitalized, and we have a sustainable, profitable model.
Yeah.
So when something comes along now, we get to collectively sit in a really interesting vantage point position. Go, that's really cool. I'm going to build it. I'm going to copy it. Because by the way, you copied my entire business model. So I'm completely okay with taking a feature that I like.
Yeah.
Right. And the cool part is we also have scale. So sometimes I see something and I'm like, that sounds cool, but you guys have no idea the endemic problem you're creating when you scale.
Because of the way they've set it up.
Right. Because it's like, that's cool when you have 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Because I can actually punch in a calculator in our system and go, oh my God, they're creating a black hole that at 1,000 agents doesn't exist. But if you get to 50,000 agents, it'll actually break your model.
Yeah.
Right. Because I can actually punch it into our system and go, oh, that's not a good idea. Go do more of that.
Well, that's super interesting because it's like, to your point, it becomes this incredible. I just had this image pop into my head that the best position to be in is at a position that's high up top of a mountain.
Yeah.
So I can see everything that's going on. So because Glenn, what I'm very clear on is because Glenn did the heavy lifting, it makes it easy for me to build fast.
100%.
100%, because he did the heavy lifting of taking the company public. He had to sell this to people like this is actually like a viable model.
Glenn drove around the country.
Yeah.
Right. Doing lunch and learns when no one knew what he was talking about.
And then stories were like at the beginning, it took like 3 weeks to get paid. So I became very clear, I am following down the same path as Glenn. The only difference is he set up all the infrastructure.
I mean, he said it on just about every platform. If you ever talk to him, if this existed, he would have just built on top of it.
Right.
He's like, this is difficult.
It's very difficult. So, and I became clear because it was shocking to me. Like he said, like it took him a year to get to like 100 agents or so, or like a while. It took a while, like 18 months or something like that. And I was like, holy smokes, it took me 10 months. But the reason why it took me 10 months is because he did that. He did all the heavy lifting. And then the other thing I think is interesting is like, I heard this quote one time that said, thinking's hard. That's why most people just judge. The hard part is doing the heavy lifting of thinking, looking at models, right? And the really cool part is once you've done that heavy lifting and you place your bet and you're like, hey, with a high degree of probability, this is the direction, then you get reinforcement that it's accurate. So like when you're saying like, yeah, when Netflix came around, these other models look exactly like them. And that's what we're seeing happening in our industry where they're like, you know what their claim to fame is? We're the next EXP. Here was Leo Perea. It's awesome to meet you, man. We did a Zoom podcast and we decided, hey, we're right down the street from each other.
We realized we're one county away.
I know, we're just neighbors, man. So it's awesome to be here with you.
That's actually one of the coolest things about our company. It's completely virtual, and when I talk to people, they're always like, I'll feel disconnected. And I actually tell people that I think the human connection that we experience because we're virtual is even better.